We used to be farmers and work for ourselves, but when the concept of money was invented, people worked for money instead of themselves. And today we have what is known as wage slavery. We are dependent on that wage. We cannot live or function without it. Working for money seems to be really convenient, but we must not forget that we are also trading something far more valuable for it. And that is time. Time is the one thing we cannot get more of, no matter how much money we have. Now, some of you might be saying that we work for food and survival, and basically that we've built this society, this structure where we help each other to do just that, survive. And for most part, I would agree. And I like the idea of us people living in a society where we don't have to worry about food or shelter. But it seems to be that practically speaking, we are working to entertain some kind of consumer lifestyle. A lifestyle we were fed by companies, thinking we need certain things to have a fulfilling life. And we seem to spend more than ever, but we still make the same amount of money, making ourselves more and more dependent of our paychecks. We build our lives around a work that fuels our lifestyle, and we get more and more sucked into it. We fight to get more responsibility, more money, just to impress others. And we spend more and more on fancy things that we don't really need, getting more and more entangled in this work-oriented lifestyle. In a lot of cases, people start to care about their workplaces. We don't even realize that we care about a lifeless company that only cares about making money. And this is why we are wage slaves. And what's even worse, we accept a life of owning money. We buy houses, cars, trips on credit, becoming more and more dependent of our jobs. We create a reality where we are told what to do, and we cannot afford to say no.
In the past 20 years, the share of profits of the largest 200 corporations in the United States has risen very sharply, partly as a result of the internet, which was supposed to have the opposite effect, but it's having the effect of intensifying the oligopolistic character of the core U.S. economy. Russia was induced to adopt what was called shock therapy, a harsh, quick market transformation, which devastated the economy, created enormous social disarray, a rise of what are called oligarchs, kleptocrats, high mortality. And Clinton started the policy of expanding NATO to the east in violation of firm, unambiguous promises to Gorbachev not to do so. Yeltsin, Putin's friend, opposed it. Other Russian leaders opposed it, but they didn't react. They accepted it. When Putin came in, he continued that policy. Meanwhile, did reconstruct the Russian economy. Russian society became a viable, deeply authoritarian society under his tight control. He himself was organized a major kleptocracy with him in the middle, apparently became very wealthy. On the international front, he pretty much continued the former policies. As U.S. diplomats, practically every diplomat who had any contact with Russia had been dispatched there or knew about it, as they all warned from the 90s that what Clinton was doing, expanded by Bush too afterwards, was reckless and provocative, that Russia did have a clear red line before Putin, which he adhered to, namely no NATO membership for Ukraine and Georgia. This is pretty much how things went on.
The year is 1990. The Soviet Union is on its last legs. Washington and Moscow are discussing a crucial European question: the reunification of Germany. Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet leader, agrees. But he has one condition: the NATO must not expand eastward. It must not enter Russia's security sphere. The US officials agreed, but the terms were never written down. You could argue this was a mistake. Until a promise is codified, it means nothing really. Having said that, a betrayal is a betrayal, written agreement or not. In the next 2 decades, NATO did exactly that. They adopted an open door policy. What does that mean? That NATO's membership is always open. Any European nation willing to join can do so. There is only one condition: all NATO members must agree on the new member. Since 1991, there have been multiple waves of NATO expansion. The first one was in 1999. Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic joined the NATO. All three were members of the Warsaw Pact. Now they're all NATO allies. The second wave came in 2004. Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia, all of them joined NATO. Then came the controversial Bucharest summit in 2008. NATO turned its focus on the Western Balkans. Albania and Croatia joined in 2009, Montenegro in 2017, North Macedonia in 2020. 3 countries are considered aspiring members: Bosnia and Herzegovina, Ukraine, and Georgia. Now, if you look at this map now, it has changed completely. Before 1991, NATO was confined to Western Europe. Today, it is at Russia's gates. Vladimir Putin is not the only leader to have condemned this expansion. It was criticized by Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin too. The difference is, Putin is drawing a red line, and that red line for him is Ukraine. Does that make him right? Of course not. NATO is not the only one breaking its historical commitments, you see. Yesterday we told you about Ukraine's nuclear arsenal. It was surrendered on one condition: that the world powers would protect Ukraine's sovereignty. And one of those world powers, just to have signed that agreement, was Russia. Both NATO and Russia must ask themselves some serious questions here. For instance, Joe Biden keeps talking about the Pacific pivot. So what's the point of this European obsession? Why bother poking Vladimir Putin? Also, is Ukraine an ideal NATO candidate? We're talking about a former Soviet republic here, a country that has close cultural ties with Russia. Some of their senior commanders also served in the Soviet Union. Why does America want to take this strategic risk? Well, Washington says it doesn't. In 2008, President George Bush opened the door for both Georgia and Ukraine. It's been nearly 14 years. 4 countries have joined the NATO in this time, in these 14 years, but Ukraine and Georgia are still on the waiting list. Why is that? Because European countries are not convinced. The likes of Germany and France, they fear Russian reprisal. So Ukraine became the permanent bridesmaid. But in 2014, Putin again rocked the boat. He invaded and annexed Crimea. Suddenly, the NATO movement was alive again. The current president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, wants to join the alliance as soon as possible. And that's where we stand today. Around 30 years back, America won the Cold War, but they were not satisfied. They wanted to dominate Europe. They wanted to humiliate the Soviet successor state, Russia. Last time around, vague verbal commitments were made by both sides. Nothing was codified or written down. This time around, such rookie mistakes must be avoided. Transparent and open talks, that's what we need this time.
The main question we should be asking ourselves is what can be done to bring the crimes and atrocities to an end. That's the crucial question. And there are 2 possibilities, as recognized by anyone who has any concern for the fate of Ukrainians. One possibility is to move on to facilitate the destruction of Ukraine and possibly a nuclear war. The alternative is to move towards a negotiated diplomatic settlement. Now, that kind of settlement will be ugly. That's a fact. It will have to offer President Putin some kind of escape hatch. It will have to be a settlement that agrees on the neutralization of Ukraine and some diplomatic finesse to put aside for the time being the status of Donbass and Crimea to be negotiated at a later state, and a ceasefire and withdrawal of troops.
Will there be a war between U.S. and China in the 21st century?
If there is, we're finished. A war between the U.S. and China would destroy the possibilities of organized life on Earth.
Propaganda. Many use the word when talking about countries like North Korea, Kazakhstan, Iran. Countries viewed as authoritarian through the lens of the Western media. Press freedom, freedom of thought. People use those terms when talking about countries like the United States, France, Australia, democracies. In 1988, Noam Chomsky co-authored a book with Edward Herman called Manufacturing Consent. It blasted apart the notion that media acts as a check on political power, that media inform the public, serve the public, so that we can better engage in the political process. In fact, media manufacture our consent. They tell us what those in power need them to tell us so we can fall in line. Democracy is staged with the help of media that work as propaganda machines. Media operate through 5 filters. The first has to do with ownership. Mass media firms are big corporations. Often they're part of even bigger conglomerates. Their endgame, profit. And so it's in their interests to push for whatever guarantees that profit. Critical journalism takes second place to the needs and interests of the corporation. The second filter exposes the real role of advertising. Media costs a lot more than consumers will ever pay. So who fills the gap? Advertisers. And what are the advertisers paying for? Audiences. And so it isn't so much that the media are selling you a product, their output. They're also selling advertisers a product, you. How does the establishment manage the media? That's the third filter. Journalism cannot be a check on power because the very system encourages complicity. Governments, corporations, big institutions know how to play the media game. They know how to influence the news narrative. They feed media scoops, official accounts, interviews with the experts. They make themselves crucial to the process of journalism. So those in power and those who report on them are in bed with each other. If you want to challenge power, you'll be pushed to the margins. Your name won't be down. You won't be getting in. You've lost your access. You've lost the story. When the media, journalists, whistleblowers, sources, stray away from the consensus, they get flat. That's the fourth filter. When the story is inconvenient for the powers that be, you'll see the flat machine in action, discrediting sources, trashing stories, and diverting the conversation. To manufacture consent, you need an enemy, a target. That common enemy is the fifth filter. Communism, terrorists, immigrants, a common enemy. A boogeyman to fear helps corral public opinion. 5 filters, one big media theory. Consent is being manufactured all around you, all the time.
We'd like to ask for your input. Share your opinion and expertise with us in the comments after watching the video. If you're a subscriber, you'll always get a heart from us as a small thank you, and we'll pin your important post to the top where everyone will read it first. Just make sure you've already subscribed, like the video, and mention both at the beginning of your comment.